Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo, and Skyblaze, looks like we got a pretty empty studio here tonight.
Yeah, I know that Cat is held up in the transporter beam, trapped in the pattern buffer. We're working on resolving it. We're sure that she'll come back with all her limbs in the correct order.
And all her internals where they should be. And Mike, I guess, is AWOL this week, so we'll just have to soldier on. He's probably busy working on our Fools Who Ride campaign. So yes, it's just the two of us this week, unless someone else shows up. And we got a fun show tonight. We are discussing something that we've been semi looking forward to and semi dreading, and that's the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. So that's gonna be an interesting discussion. So, but first, of course, there's some housekeeping. So in case you guys noticed, this week would normally have been a Fools Who Ride episode, but we put out episode 2 last week because we had some scheduling issues. So next week is going to be another Nerd of the Third Power episode, but you're also going to receive a regularly scheduled Fools Who Ride, and then after that, we're going to be going back to the leapfrogging week schedule. So so just give you guys a heads up, you're going to be getting two shows next week instead of just the one. And so with that, let's just jump right into it right here with your favorite segment, my favorite segment, the Ask a Geek, and we got a few questions here. First one here is addressed to everyone, and this one comes from Lyle, and he asked, "What are our thoughts on Star Trek Picard so far?" So Skyblaze, have you seen any of this yet?
I'm about 3 episodes in, I think. I have 3 or 4 episodes in.
Okay, so without going too heavy into it, because we are actually covering it for a show later in the season. What are your thoughts on it so far?
In terms of acting and writing, it's very, very good, but it's so bleak and dark, and I'm not sure how much it feels like Star Trek. Although even amidst the darkness, there's some kind of like, we can fix this, maybe. And if it turns out that yes, these horrible things can be sorted out and fixed, then great, and that will be a Star Trek paradigm. But at the moment, it feels so dark and gritty and unpleasant in places, and it's like, Star Trek is supposed to be about hope. Can I have some, please? Please? The acting's great.
I mean, Patrick Stewart always knocks it out of the park. But yeah, the casting has been great so far.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 2 episodes in, because I'm watching it every week with my dad for our weekly movie night. And I'm kind of the same mind. It doesn't really feel like Star Trek. It's really hard for me to kind of reconcile the fact that this is a sequel to The Next Generation.
Yeah.
Which, had that sense of optimism and exploration and, wagon train to the stars. Whereas this feels kind of almost like 24 in space. Almost, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, other people have said similar things.
So I'm giving it a fair shake, and I'm waiting to see where it goes. But like you said, so far the acting's pretty good. I love the presentation. The visuals of the series are great. And I without spoiling anything, but that ship that the bad guys are currently working on, I really want to see one of the original inhabitants in this new higher budget show. Just the one. I don't want them to become the main villains, but I do want to see just one of them. So, because I think that'd be cool. All right, and let's see here now. Next question here. Well, let's see. This one would be for Mike, but he's not here. Let's see. Okay, here's a question here. This one comes from Rick, and his question is: after we get done with this campaign for Fools Who Ride, are there any other settings that we might consider doing campaigns in? So, because I don't know shit about Dungeons and Dragons, I'm going to defer to you on this one, Skyblaze.
Most of you listeners who will know that I have been a DM GM for a while. I've got a couple of ideas for D&D, and one of them comes from if you Google Humblewood, which is basically like birds and forest creatures going on D&D adventures, and it's very cute. And this was a campaign that was crowdsourced, and me and my husband contributed to it, so we have a copy of the campaign, and it's very cool. And I haven't run it yet, and I'd quite like to run that. The other one is a setting that I've kind of made up myself, and it involves dragons and Asmodeus, and I'd quite like to run that as well. But I don't want to reveal too much.
So you think you might? So you think if we do additional seasons, you might step behind the DM screen at some point?
If you guys are interested.
All right. Well, we shall see. We shall see. And I see that our transporter issues have resolved, and Kat has appeared. So, Kat, how are you doing this week?
Sorry, you wouldn't believe the traffic and all of the little microscopic traffic. I'm doing all right. It's like really a lot of rain here, and now it's gonna snow, and I'm not okay with it.
Oh, well, sorry to hear that. Well, you're just in time for Ask a Geek, and we got a question here that'll be up your alley. This one came from Rick, and he asked if we do additional seasons of Fools Who Ride, are there any other Dungeons and Dragons settings or systems that we might want to run in future seasons?
I have already played it, but I would love to see the characters that we are currently playing do a run through Curse of Strahd.
I have no idea what that is.
It's dark, man. It's real dark. And vampires and a lot of undead, so much undead. And my group did my home group did like a homebrew of it, and we had a lot of fun doing it. But we also had 2 clerics, so yeah, we did all right. But I think it would be really fun to play through it with you, Gonzo, because I think that would be a wild ride. But other than that, I mean, I'm currently doing a Salt Marsh campaign, and that would be really fun for our group as well, because it is 100% pirates.
I was just saying, Kat, that I would like to run Humblewood, which is the crowdsourced campaign, which is the birds and forest creatures.
Yeah. We're gonna do one. My DM has all the Humblewood stuff.
Yeah, I do as well.
We're planning on it at some point, but I also just got voluntold to run a Adventures of Middle-earth. So I'm gonna be DMing a Middle-earth one at some point. Obviously not for recording.
I'm amazed that someone had to tell you and that you didn't hold everyone else at gunpoint to let you do it.
Well, see, here's the thing is that I really don't want to DM.
Ah, okay.
But the thing is okay, so all of the there was a big sale on all of the materials, so a couple of guys in my D&D crew got all the material that you need for super cheap, instead of like the normal prices. So we were like, ooh, this is really good. I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And then I was like, I want to play a ranger, I want to play one of the Dunedain. Like, I've always wanted to do that. I think that would be really, really fun. And they're like, what do you mean? You're the one who's going to have to DM it. And I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, but you correct us all the time on every little fact about Lord of the Rings. So I'm like, I know, but still, don't punish me. So I got voluntold, and I'm going to end up doing it.
Okay. Well, let's see. The only answer that I really have is a friend of mine who he DMs for his group. When he found out that I was playing D&D for the show, this is my buddy Hambone that I told you about, the one who made the Ninja Star throwing dice when we did our D&D episode. He's one of those people who, when he finds out, because he's got ADHD like really badly, but he's one of those people who, when he finds out that you're into something that he's really into, he has to, like, you know, be the tour guide and like dump everything on you. Oh, here's all this cool stuff that you might enjoy, and you walk away from him with, like, you know 12 books to read, a couple video games to play, movies to watch, and all this homework that he's given you. Well, for Christmas, when he found out that I was playing D&D for this group, he bought me an Eberron source book, and I've been kind of flipping through that in my idle time. And it looks interesting. It looks like a neat spin on the post-apocalyptic fantasy genre. So I'm kind of like, okay, this might be interesting to explore. I don't know shit about the settings here, but some of the stuff like the Warforged look really interesting. I think it'd be cool to play.
The Warforged, great.
Yeah, I think interesting to play a magic robot.
Yes.
So, but we'll. I'm sorry, you're about to say something?
I did think of one more that I want to do because I've heard an actual, like, a short playthrough of Dragon Heist, of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that is in Dragon Heist, and I think that would be really cool.
Okay, I fully acknowledge I don't know shit about Dragon Heist, so I'm probably way off base, but now I'm imagining like an Ocean's 11 film where they're stealing dragon eggs.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily dragon eggs, but yeah, it's, do crimes. It's, yes.
Incidentally, Eberron lends itself to like a fantasy take on Blade Runner quite well.
That would be cool.
Which
Right,
I wasn't in that particular campaign. It was something that was run for the student role-playing nationals, but I heard stories.
Okay.
And to expand on it a little bit more, I don't know if I don't remember the question now, if it was just D&D settings, but I actually DM'd for the first time a few weeks ago in a one-shot. And now I'm kind of excited to do it again for maybe another one-shot, but I DM'd a Grant Howitt game called Sexy Battle Wizards. and Grant Howitt makes games like Sexy Battle Wizards and Honey Heist. So if you've watched Critical Role, they've played Honey Heist a bunch of times, and that's one of Grant Howitt's games. And they are just fun, ridiculous, one-page games. Like, he has another one called Jason Statham's Big Vacation that I'd really like to run for a group, because what is better than just role-playing Jason Statham for a few hours? But I would love if we could do a one-shot like that. Just a really ridiculous, high-energy, just balls-to-the-wall, weird one-shot.
On that note, I do have a bunch of the Doctor Who role-playing game book.
I don't think we'll ever do that, simply because of the fact we'd all argue over who got to be the Doctor.
I've got a way around this, because I've made campaigns where nobody gets to be the Doctors. It's a bunch of the companions. Trying to figure out what the hell is going on without the Doctor.
Everybody's the layman, the everyday man. That'd be fun.
Yep.
You just want to play as Ace. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh no. Ace is awesome. Be quiet.
I have in my possession but I've never used. I have the Big Eyes Small Mouth.
Oh wow.
Role-playing game for the Anime Slayers. That I have never. One of my friends got it for me a few years ago before I had gotten fully back into role-playing. My friends and I are talking about, well, maybe one day we'll do a Besm for Slayers. It would be really fun. I've also always wanted to do, and I bought a copy of the original Vampire the Masquerade, but I've never actually played it. And I've got a friend who will run it for me. I just don't have that kind of free time.
Okay. And he's got a follow-up question here addressed to me, and that's, have I gotten into dice collecting? And no, I have not. I have 3 sets of dice and 1 bronze Zelda D20, and that's it. That's all I'm going to buy. I do not have the dragon sickness like Cat, at least not for dice. My addiction is video games.
It's so bad. I have 3 Kickstarters coming in this year, and I have 4 Kickstarters coming in this year, and I've already gotten in one of them, so I'm waiting on 3 more Kickstarters.
You're going to be a story in the news with, like, woman found buried under mountain of dice.
God, I wish. If you've got to go out in a blaze of dicey glory.
Alrighty.
I have rolled a natural 1, and I will die under these dice.
Okay, and let's see. Next question here. This one comes from Mary, and it's addressed to me. And her question is, what do I think of the recent news of the troubles at GameStop? Which, for those of you who don't know what's been going on, a number of news articles have been released lately about some of the desperation tactics that are being employed by GameStop to try and drive their numbers up. And I mean, as much as I hate GameStop, I'm not really surprised by this, because I don't know if I ever mentioned this on the show. But years and years ago, when we first got started, I was actually working as a shift manager at Blockbuster in the last days for them before the Reaper came for them. So everything that I'm seeing GameStop doing now, I saw firsthand. I saw Blockbuster try and do the same thing, and it didn't work. So I'm really thinking that GameStop's days are really numbered. I would give them maybe another, I'd say 2 years, because they are going to get a bit of a boost with the release of the new console generation this holiday. So they're going to get a bit of a boost, but it's going to be too little too late. I really don't think GameStop is going to last longer than another couple years. Which, while that sucks for all the boots on the ground employees that are going to wind up losing their jobs, I have no sympathy for the higher ups, because the way the GameStop has been run has just been abominable, and I will be so happy to see it go. As to what I think will happen afterwards, I think we're going to see a sort of a resurgence of the mom and pop game stores. It's maybe some smaller chains cropping up. And I'm really looking forward to that, because now that we'll actually have some competition in the games retail space, maybe we'll start getting some better deals and more consumer friendly practices. Assuming digital distribution doesn't just kill the whole thing whole hog, but we'll see what happens. I don't know. We're in a weird place right now in the games retail space, so it's kind of just a wait and see thing right now. So. And I also apologize to those of you who are expecting me to go on another epic GameStop rant, but I refuse to expend any more energy on, something that I know is already going to die. And let's see. I had another question here. One actually here for you, Kat. What did I do with it? All right, well, if I find it again, I'll just ask it next episode. All right, and so with that, that's about all the time for Ask a Geek that we have this week. Thank you, as always, for sending your questions in. As always, you can send them to us through the email at drgonzo@nerdpower.com. We love getting your questions, love reading them on the air, so go ahead and get your questions in, and you just might get your question read on the show. Okay, and so with that, we are going to launch into the meat and potatoes this episode, and that is the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Something that we've been, it's had kind of a pretty storied history from that initial awful, just bad, super bad, mega bad initial design for Sonic the Hedgehog up to its eventual release. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but now it's here and we've seen it, and so me and Skyblaze are going to discuss it. And I'm just gonna say I've been looking forward to this episode, because unless you're just getting into the show right now, you will know that Skyblaze is a huge Sonic stan. So I've been looking forward to this episode to hear her opinion on it, if nothing else. So let's just jump right into it by giving our general thoughts on the film. So Skyblaze, let's start with you. What are your general thoughts on the Sonic movie?
It was okay. It was not awful. It was not like genius, but it was fine. And I was very surprised at how enjoyable it was and how competently put together it was, all things taken into consideration.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of the same mind. It was definitely a lot better than I feared it was going to be. It had a lot of problems for me, which we'll get into as we start dissecting the movie in detail. But yeah, I was actually surprised by the fact that this movie, by how actually watchable this movie was. Especially when you consider the track record of video game movies, up until very recently. So yeah, I was actually this is a bit of a surprise. So let's just start taking this movie apart by discussing the plot. So Skyblaze, you want to give a synopsis of the plot of this film?
Well, it's essentially it's a road trip movie, crossed with Alien on Earth story. So, as it transpires, Sonic used to live on... It's never named, but we assume it's Mobius, because Green Hill was clearly there with the loop-de-loops and everything. He was being looked after by an owl, for some reason. So
Longclaw is not an actual Sonic character.
No, it's not a character I've seen before. So that appears to be something that's original to the film. Then what appeared to be echidnas show up to try and kidnap him for reasons which were not entirely clear. They probably want his speed power, but it's not made explicit. But they were definitely echidnas. The gold rings in this settings are portals to other worlds, and Almum chucks him through a portal to Earth and says that he needs to remain hidden. He spends the next several years growing up in this small town called Green Hills. Lol. Basically kind of semi-stalking a small town cop and his wife until he is accidentally discovered. His discovery prompts the government to freak out and send in their pet genius eccentric, Dr. Robotnik, who is played by Jim Carrey at his manic best. He's actually one of the best things about the film. Sonic loses a bunch of the gold rings through one of these portals in San Francisco and persuades the cop to take him to San Francisco so he can get the rings back so he can go to another world and be safe. And this starts basically a very, very long, involved chase scene that lasts for most of the rest of the film. Does that sum it up?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like you mentioned, it's a road trip movie. They get to San Francisco, they find the rings, and then there's a final showdown with Robotnik back in Green Hills. And along the way, Tom, the police sheriff, who's been taking Sonic to San Francisco, discovers that he actually likes this little furry blue alien, and decides to kind of adopt him into the family, and that's where the film ends. With Sonic actually living with Tom and his wife in Green Hills, and apparently being searched for by Tails, who shows up in a mid-credits scene, which I have issue with, but we'll get into that as we start breaking the movie down to its component parts. So, what did you think of the general plot of this film?
The plot was serviceable in the same way that very early video game plots were serviceable. It was only a couple of steps removed from excuse plot. The only reason the plot exists, was to string together a bunch of these scenes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Video game films tend to trip up over themselves when they make the plot too complicated. And also, I think it was a fairly wise decision to have it mostly be Sonic by himself, as opposed to have any of the other characters in until the very end. Because there are a lot of characters in Sonic. A lot.
Yeah, the plot is really my biggest issue with this film, for a number of reasons. Like you said, it feels like an excuse plot. The movie certainly has a lot of really amusing moments. But the problem is to me at least, it just feels like a film of moments. It's basically like, okay, we're going to set up this joke and then we're just going to move on to the next one. Whereas, the underlying, glue of the story that's supposed to hold everything together just feels very weak. Another thing that really bothered me about the plot of this film, and it's something that I brought up in the Detective Pikachu review, is I get really frustrated when video game movies have to do this isn't a video game movie story. This is how these video game characters wound up in the real world. So this didn't feel like a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. It felt like a Sonic in the real world movie, if that makes sense. And it really frustrates me when studios try to make a video game movie, but they don't have enough faith in the source material to actually have it stand on that source material. Again, not to keep comparing this movie to Detective Pikachu, because that's a very unfair comparison. But Detective Pikachu, it was a Pokemon story set in the Pokemon world. It wasn't Pokemon on Earth, and here's the bullshit explanation of how they got here. whereas Sonic is, like you said, it's an alien on Earth story. And that really disappoints me because, you know, it's if you've read some of the expanded material for Sonic, particularly the Archie comics, it is completely possible to tell really compelling stories with this world and with these characters. And I really feel like Sega kind of did Sonic dirty by having his motion picture be this. I mean, you could swap out Sonic for any other, for, you know, a random alien, and the movie would change not a bit.
Point of order, it wasn't really Sega who had a great deal to do with the plot. They licensed out the character, but a lot of the plot was done by movie people, not by Sega people. So that's mostly down to Paramount and or Sony, who had it before.
Well, then my ire is directed at Paramount, but yeah, I don't feel like Sega should have signed off on this, but I mean that's getting into studio politics. But like I said, the movie had its enjoyable moments. There were some moments that I actually did laugh out loud. Excuse me. Again, but like going back to what I said earlier about it being just a film of moments, one of the things that really bothers me lately is I'm kind of starting to notice when movies are giving away a lot of their best moments in the advertising, and it really felt like this movie felt like just a string of trailer moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So that's really just kind of my biggest issue is, again, I'm really disappointed that the studios didn't have enough faith in the source material to let it stand on its own. There were also some really awkward bits in the script with like the product placement, like say for Olive Garden, or when the wife was saying, "Oh, I'm looking for apartments on Zillow," and I'm like, okay, this is really fucking forced. I know who's financing this movie now.
It was even worse in the UK because Olive Garden doesn't exist here.
Really?
Yeah, we don't have that. So I actually heard a kid behind me go, "What's Olive Garden?" Like, this did not translate well.
Yeah. So that's so, I mean, like I said, it's got amusing moments, but the overall story glue I felt was very weak. And I don't know how they can transition this into a sequel actually set in Sonic's world, or if they even plan to do that, but I mean, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, considering that they set up the echidnas and that world exists, I can see them doing that and then kind of exploring that a bit more, considering he now has the will to stand and fight his own ground rather than just running for it.
Yeah. Another issue that I have is with Sonic's characterization, and this is something you and I have actually discussed in something totally unrelated to this, but it really felt like that they reduced Sonic to just gotta go fast. When Sonic is as you and I have discussed, he's just as content to take it easy and just kind of, chillax, and there's more to him besides just, speed. And I really felt like they really made him into a very one-note character. I feel like there was a lot of opportunity to kind of explore his character that wasn't taken, and that he was basically just reduced to, to the MacGuffin for a joke, if that makes any sense.
I see what you mean, and to a certain extent that's true, but they also kind of did hint a bit at there being more depth to him. And how much of that was an outgrowth of the fact that he'd been isolated for so long? So, yes and no. I sort of agree with you, but I can see room for the growth of the character if they choose to do a sequel, which they have set it up for.
Yeah, and that brings me to kind of the eyebrow raising of Tails showing up in the mid-credit sequence, because I got the impression that he'd been searching for Sonic, but the question that raised in my mind was wait a minute, Sonic's been raised in isolation when he was in his world, and then he's spent the last 10 years or so living on Earth. So how would Tails even know about him? So the only explanation they can come up with is maybe Longclaw survived and Tails is working for her.
That's where I went with that.
So
Longclaw has another adoptee, raised them, and it's Tails, and then says, "I had another child that I was raising before you, and I don't know what happened to him." And then Tails decides to try and find him.
Makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, it did to my brain anyway.
So that's the script to this film. What did you think of the casting of this film?
The guy who's voicing Sonic was
Ben Schwartz.
Yeah, he's okay. He's not my favorite Sonic voice actor, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I am baffled as to why they just didn't get Roger Craig Smith to do it.
I think it's because Ben Schwartz actually has a lot of capital in the in voice acting right now, because he's doing Dewey Duck in DuckTales. That's actually one of the problems I had with the casting this movie, was every time Sonic spoke, I just heard Dewey Duck. And I think he was also in Rise of TMNT as Donatello. So he's actually got a lot of capital right now in voice acting. He's been getting a lot of work. So, which, I mean, power to him. He's great. But the problem is like, he's one of those voice actors who, once you recognize him in one role, you recognize him in every other role. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Which is why I think Roger Craig Smith tends to give a lot more nuance to the character, which could have partially corrected some of the problems that we both had with the characterization of Sonic. I mean, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, they should have got Jaleel White," and I was like, "No, that ship sailed a long time ago."
But can I say, I would spill the blood of a dozen men to see Jaleel White voice Sonic on the big screen. I would eat a baby to have that happen. Okay, and let's see. Next up, the next big name is Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. And can I just say, before we get into his actual performance, how happy I was that they actually called him Dr. Robotnik in this movie instead of fucking Eggman, because I goddamn hate that name so much.
I was surprised at how much I enjoyed his performance, because I quite often find Jim Carrey a bit much, but he seemed to work with this.
Jim Carrey is at his best when he's playing a character who is supposed to be over the top. See, for example, The Mask or The Grinch. He's really at his best when he's supposed to go all out, and I love his performance as Robotnik. He's turned up to 11 throughout the whole movie, and they really give him the most entertaining bits of the movie are centered around him. I would love to see just like, if they do like kind of a what if thing just about Robotnik. I'd really love to see that, because he just knocked it out of the park as far as performance, and I love just how he's just so stuck up and just full of himself. Like his intro scene with the soldier, who I can't help but call him Buck Compton, because that's the same actor who played Lieutenant Buck Compton in Band of Brothers. So every time I see that actor, I just see him from Band of Brothers, and I just love seeing Robotnik just go to town on him. And this is like, oh, just the doctor thinks you're basic. I was, again, going back to not having a lot of faith in the source material. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't give Robotnik his trademark design until the very end of the movie. I would have loved to see. I get that they were kind of going for Robotnik kind of going insane over the course of the movie, and that's what led to his trademark look. But I would have liked to have seen him reach that breaking point a lot sooner. Just because that fucking orange mustache, that fucking flared out mustache at the end just looks so fucking awesome on him. But yeah, Jim Carrey really kind of steals this movie. Which is kind of unfortunate, because like I said, it's fully possible to tell a great story with these characters. But like I said, he just kind of just eats the scenery.
Yep.
And that brings us to James Marsden as Tom Wachowski, the sheriff of Green Hills. So, what do you think?
Okay, Blandy McBlandy face.
Yeah, he really didn't contribute a whole lot to this film, did he?
No.
Yeah, he kind of just felt like the wheelman. there to drive Sonic to San Francisco.
Yep.
There wasn't really a whole lot to his character, although, God bless Marsden, he does the best he can with the material he has. So, but this is really more of an issue with the script than with the acting. And the same goes for Tika Sumpter as Maddie Wachowski, who, I don't know.
They go to all this trouble of setting up the fact that she's a vet and then do nothing with that. It's like, why?
Yeah,
you could have at least had a joke in there about, like, no, you shouldn't have that because Hedgehogs are lactose intolerant. You should have at least had that much.
Yeah, she really, once you get past Robotnik, Tom, and Sonic, all the other characters are really just kind of pointless. There's not really any real reason for them to be there. And
the lunatic guy who's like, the Blue Devil is real. That was kind of funny.
Yeah, kind of amusing. So, but like I said, it just the biggest problem with the cast in this movie is that once you get past Robotnik, Tom, and Sonic, there's really not much of anything for them to do. I'm trying to remember a moment where I laughed out loud or that Maddie was actually present for, and I can't really think of one. The closest that comes to is just the scene. I guess the scene where she's trying to do a veterinary examination, but it was really more cringe than anything else, because, like, I don't know, just that scene just didn't land for me. I don't know, like I said, they should have gone a little bit more into her being a vet, and then of course there was a whole forced product placement. Oh, I've been looking for apartments on Zillow. I was like, oh God, really? How much did they pay you to say that?
The scene where in her sister's house, where her sister is tied up, and she's like, let Mum go. Oh, but I need the bathroom. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, the whole subplot with the sister-in-law, I didn't get. Like,
what is her problem with him?
That's just it. We're never told. She's just the sister-in-law who thinks that, he's no good for you, but we're not given any indication as to why. So if her whole bit just really felt like padding. There's no reason for her to be there. Like I said, just there's so many issues with the scripting in this movie. Like, why are some of these characters here? There's no point to them. So I mean, casting is kind of pretty bare bone. The only other actor that I had any real happiness in seeing was the one general played by the guy who played Saul Ty in Battlestar Galactica. It's like, I recognize you. So, all right, so that's this film's scripting. Now, what did we think of the presentation of the movie?
I really wish we could have seen more of, like, actual Green Hill, Mobius Green Hill, because that looked so good.
It did.
I was like, oh, why couldn't the rest of the film be there?
And I love that I didn't catch this the first time I saw it. I had to actually go. One of the things that I think is really cool about this movie is they sneak all these little hints and Easter eggs into the film.
There's so many.
And this was something that I didn't catch the first time I saw it in the theater. I had to actually look up a YouTube clip to catch it. But you know that shot in the Green Hill where Sonic's going through the loop-de-loop?
Mm.
If you look at how the terrain is laid out, that's the Green Hill stage from Smash Brothers. And nice. I didn't catch that the first time I saw that. I actually had to go back and look at it, and then I had because I was at my office at the time, so I had the YouTube clip on my laptop, and then I had Smash Brothers playing on my TV, and I actually pulled up that stage and was like, son of a bitch, that is the Green Hill stage from Smash. And then wasn't one of Sonic's creators or artists or something one of the military men in the briefing room?
One of the military guys in the briefing room was Gary Chalk, who voiced Robotnik in Sonic Underground. Another one that I found out about subsequently was when Dr. Robotnik's pulling up all of his playlists. If you look in the top left, there's a playlist of songs by Crush 40.
Okay. Speaking of the music, there was a one that I caught because as Kat loves to needle me for, I'm the only one who pays attention to the music. But when they're painting up the house in Green Hills, Tom and Maddie, the music that's playing is actually a kind of a orchestral cover of the actual Green Hills stage music.
Yep. There's a couple of other musical cues as well. There's one for Metropolis Zone at one point. It's just the opening few bars, but it's there. And there's another one as well. I've forgotten what it is. Nope, gone.
Okay. Notice any other Sonic Easter eggs?
Oh, there's loads. There's when he's playing ping pong against himself.
Mm-hmm.
The sign that he's playing it on is for Hilltop, as in Hilltop Zone.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that. That's from Sonic and Knuckles, wasn't it?
Sonic 2.
Sonic 2. Okay.
It's the one that disappears under lava.
Oh, okay. All right.
There's a few points where there's poses that he does, which is things like he does the Sonic Adventure pose from the cover art at one point.
I did catch that one.
Yeah, and that made me chuckle. Oh, the Sonic, the famous shitty fan art for the Blue Devil. That made a few people in the cinema that I was at laugh. And when the power goes out in Robotnik's lab, when he resets it, the button is for Badniks.
I didn't catch that.
I giggled.
Okay. All right. So, were there any other standout moments of this film, or anything else about it that you particularly enjoyed or didn't like?
I quite like the confrontation at the end where he is what appears to be doing homing dash repeatedly against Robotnik's ship. That was quite nice. And then right at the very end, where Robotnik clearly going screamingly bonkers in the Mushroom Hill area. He even starts going a bit Mike Pollock towards the end of his monologue in that section. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, now Mike Pollock, who's that?
He's the current voice of Robotnik. Has been since Sonic X.
Okay.
I liked Baby Sonic as well. I thought he was cute.
Yeah, Baby Sonic was adorable. Okay, we got to get some shout outs here to the design of Sonic. Just one of the things that I was really impressed about this movie was how they made Sonic's new design work with this film. Because we all saw the original design and how awful that was, and then when we got the new design, I was like, okay, this looks all right in the trailers and the still shots, but will it hold up over an extended viewing? And it really does work, and I like kind of the neat little touches, like the fact that his shoes are mismatched and worn down before he gets his trademark pair. I thought that was just a neat little touch, and added a bit to sort of the tragedy of his character, because I really got the impression that he was getting these shoes by stealing them out of like people's trash cans.
It's also in the British Sonic comic, when he's very young. There's a plot point about him repeatedly wearing out shoes, and the red and white pair were designed especially for him so they wouldn't wear out. So it could be a reference. I'm not sure. But it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. But it actually holds up really well, and I like that. Except for a few minor niggles, it felt like it was really faithful to his game design. And then when Tails shows up right at the end, I was like, oh, he looked like he'd stepped right out of the game. So, the one CGI character design that I really felt was kind of weird was actually Longclaw, because when you put Longclaw up next to Sonic, it's really clear that they were designed by two different sensibilities, because they really don't feel like they belong in the same world together. I don't know. Am I the only one who felt that way?
I'm not entirely sure I agree. I like the design of Longclaw, but then I'm a fan of owls in general, so I'm a bit biased on that.
Yeah.
But then when you put fur and feathers are notoriously difficult to do in CG, so I don't know if that's part of it. I don't know. I'd have to watch that scene again.
I don't know. What bothered me was Sonic was, very cartoony. He looked like, how he does in the games, and Longclaw looked much more like much more kind of realistic fantasy, like she belonged in like a kid's fantasy movie or something. Any other standout issues or standout issues or things you want to shout out about this film?
Not that I can really think of. So it was perfectly serviceable as a film, and I'd watch it again with some drinks and popcorn.
All right. Well, again, I guess that brings us to our wrap up, and we start giving our final thoughts on the. So you said that I guess you give yours. So for me, like I said, my biggest issue of this film is it's got some enjoyable moments, but to me, there's this heavy air of wasted potential because, like I said, it's quite possible to tell engaging stories with Sonic's world and Sonic's characters, and I really don't like that Paramount didn't have enough faith in the source material to let it stand on its own. But I mean, it's a serviceable kids movie. It's not going to win any Oscars, but at the same time, it's not something that that's on the level of, say, Street Fighter, where your eyes bleed if you watch it. So it definitely could have been a whole lot worse than it was. That's really the kindest thing that I can say about it. So with that, this is the part of the show where we give our final ratings on the film. As always, best to worst are see it now, wait for matinee, wait for DVD, wait for cable, don't even bother, and Brian's rating, fuck this movie. So Skyblaze, what's your final rating on Sonic the Hedgehog?
I'd say either wait for matinee or wait for DVD.
Okay. I'm gonna say wait for cable. I'm gonna say wait until it's on Netflix or on streaming. This is really a movie that you can get away with just not seeing immediately, kind of waiting until you kind of pass by it in a method that you don't have to pay money for it. It's got some enjoyable moments, but it's also nowhere near a masterpiece. So. All right, and so with that is all the time we have for Nerd to the Third Power this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you guys next week for a regular Nerd to the Third Power episode, as well as another episode 3 of Fools Who Ride. So look forward to that, and we'll see you guys next week. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm Skyblaze.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. Taka, play us out.